sensitize our people with it.
So picking it up from your point, mentioning the fact that this is a conditional favor, let's look at a particular clause here. The parties, that's Article 29.5, option B, the parties shall support universal access to sexual and reproductive health commodities and healthcare services, including family planning, information and education, and integration of reproductive health into national strategies and programs. Let's also understand that the EU perspective of what human rights is, of what reproductive health is, like you've mentioned, may be quite different from what we know it here. That's where causes like abortion laws and all, which obviously is a crime in this part of the world. So my question on that is it possible that some of these clauses being removed or downplayed will affect some of the conditions of the agreement or benefits that Nigeria will be getting?
I don't think so. Nigeria is huge in terms of membership. I'm not just talking our population now. Nigeria is a prominent member of this association, and Nigeria is also influential. Now, so you see, that's why I tried to explain earlier on that there's some things that are part of what they want. When it comes to domestication of those things, if your people say they don't want it, they don't want it. And there's nothing they can do about it. So what they will now do is they'll weigh your influence and possibly find a way around it for you. That's why I talked about when Burundi pulled out. You know, Burundi, when they had the war, and you know, the people ruling them now were part of the war. And then you were bringing in the issues of ICC. At the end of the day, they had to adjust it. And they said, say, okay, we will go back to the Roman statutes on how, you know, international courts will operate as far as, because if they are allowed that to fly, all of them will be in jail by now. So they saw it coming. You know, so it's the same thing that applies. So if their understanding or their view of health rights and sexual rights is different from your own, is even diametrically opposite your own views, it's about putting your foot down. And then Nigeria is not a Benin Republic or Togo that, you know, you just push aside. No. And then Nigeria has massive influence over the African counterparts. Our president is the head of ECOWAS. Our president is strategically placed. So they look for things like that. For smaller countries, they may just ignore. You know, I learned South Africa pulled out of the Samoa Agreement at some point, but, well, that's as far as that goes. But the fact remains that your influence will determine how much things they can shove down your throat. So it's still in their own interest. Okay, like you mentioned already, it still goes back to what favors them at the end of the day. But another concern some persons raise with regards to this Samoa Agreement is the fact that it is after signing that we're now having conversations at the level of the Federal Executive Council, the National Assembly, and NEC as well. That why don't we have that conversation before signing the dotted lines? Well, I think what is supposed to be at that level is more of sensitization. Because even when you sign treaties, like I explained earlier, Section 12 of the Constitution, by the time you want to domesticate it, that's where you bring in, you know, popular participation. But what is expected, or maybe of the National Orientation Agency, or Ministry of Communication or Foreign Affairs, is to actually tell the people that this is what is on ground, this is what we're doing, you know. But I felt there wasn't much information in the space, or there wasn't much sensitization on what... So you think that is why there's... That's why you have conflicting... You know, people came on Twitter and said, this thing is purely LGBTQ. Like I told you, I said, my mechanic said, they're going to collect money from gays. That's what they want to do for us. They want to show, they want to turn all of us. And they were serious about it. I said, in this country, it can't happen now. And it takes trust for them to listen to you and believe that when you talk to them. So trust only happens where information is out there for people. So one of the things, one of the downside of this administration is carrying people along. There are a lot of things that were meant for good, or that the government is doing for our own good. But because it's poorly communicated to the people, people just run to town with different things, run to town with different interpretations, and even gross misinterpretations. And so at the end of the day, the government is now trying to chase the news. The government that is supposed to be the news and give us the news, they are now the ones chasing it because they allowed the space the gap. And at the end of the day, they'll have to spend a lot of money, a lot of PR, you know, to do this. That's basically what's happening.
All right, so let's look at other benefits apart from, you know, the bureaucracy and governance. We have here sustainable development, climate change, economic growth. Let's take it away from the human rights and gender equality perspective. How is this meant to affect, you know, the average man in Nigeria?
If you look at the issue of climate change, one of the things that, I mean, they have their own fair share of, you know, the effect of climate change. And one of the ways they try to do this is to, you know, the whole greenhouse thing, then the issue of controlled emission of carbon dioxide and all these things, because over time, it took these people to sensitize us properly on the effect of, you know, burning of things,
fossil fuel,
you know, fossil fuel, even clearing of bushes and all that, and all those things, deforestation. You know, we just get into the bush, do all those things. So with their help, they help with legislations, they help with sensitizations, and, you know, they also help with funds, ecological funds, because I know Nigeria is a beneficiary of a lot of ecological funds from these organizations. So they help us because if you leave it to us, we cannot face this thing. And the fact is that on the issue of understanding the issue of climate change, the issue of, I mean, you saw, I think it was the Lagos State Commissioner for Environment. You know, he's been going around trying to tell people that, stop throwing plastics in the gutter. Because by the time you throw, I throw, and everybody throws, at the end of the day, what happens? The place is clogged. Then you now start
it comes back to
wondering how flood is disturbing you. We saw what happened last week. Areas that never experienced flood. But then another thing is that's the human side of it. But the nature side of it is that we've seen unprecedented amount of rainfall.
Yes.
These are effects of climate change. And this is where these people come in to help us. So there's also the issue of migration. You know, I mean, over time, I'm aware, and I can say this for free, that if you look at some of these migrants who go through these funny routes to Europe, you know, some of them die funnily, some of them are, you know, subjected to inhuman, you know, treatments and everything. So these treaties are places where they help to manage situations like that. And then in some cases, they look at some of these people, instead of, you know, putting them in jail, they reach some agreement with the home country, and then they give them some soft landing.
Right.
Prior to this time, some of them were shot. Some of them, you know, when they find them like that, particularly those who go through the Arab end of the whole, you know, journey, it's always very unpleasant. Now, but treaties like this also help to mitigate and find out ways where their rights and dignity is restored. So that's one of the benefits of all this. Then the issue of terrorism, you know, they help to control, because if you look at it, Africa seems not to have a hold on, you know, this terrorist spread. If you look at how the whole thing is coming from East Africa, North Africa, you know, we're the one bearing the brunt. I mean, we heard of all these people coming. So they help with intelligence, they help with funds,